with an opening prayer. Usually how most of our programs go, like the first prayer is usually Christian, and then the last prayer would be from the Islamic side or from any other religion. I shall start with the Christian prayer. So I would like to request anyone who would be willing to take us through the opening prayer. Please just feel free to unmute or just raise your hand and I'll be able to call you out. Feel free if you'd like to take us through. Christiana, you've unmuted. I want to assume that's to take us through the opening prayer.
Yes, if you can hear me.
Yeah, loud and clearly. Thank you so much.
Let's pray. In Jesus' name, Amen. Father, we thank you. We give you praise. We worship you. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity you've given to us to learn, to deliberate. Thank you for the opportunity you've given to us to rub minds with the body. Thank you because everything that we'll be doing today is going to be directed by you. Thank you for the speaker and everyone that is participating. This knowledge will go to help us to do better in our work in the name of Jesus. And at the end of it all, we'll have every reason to say thank you. Be thou exalted. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Christiana, for taking us through that very important item on the agenda. Thank you so much, and we believe the session has been blessed and we could actually proceed without any worries of anything, and it will be for the benefit for each and everyone who's in attendance. So thank you so much, and briefly going through the housekeeping rules for today's session. We expect everyone who would be joining this session to make sure that they don't have any significant disruptions throughout the course of the session, unless if it's an emergency, but please try to keep your gadgets and other devices on mute. And we shall make use of the various platforms on the various options that we have on the Zoom platform, and that will include using the reactions, raising your hand, you can clap your hands, do everything. You can rely on the reactions. And then if you've been granted an opportunity to say a word or two, please try to just unmute, respect the opinions from others, because this would be an open deliberation and we expect everyone's opinion to be fully respected. And then we shall be recording this session, but it's very important for us to note that the first session, the first half of the session will be fully recorded. That's up to when we shall have the last part of the plagiarism presentation. Then we shall then move on to the question and answer session. If you move on to the question and answer sessions, you'd realize that we shall have to stop the recording to allow people to express themselves fully. So if you don't mind the other aspect of the housekeeping, you're perfectly welcome to keep your video on, but just bear in mind that since this is being recorded, it would be shared on YouTube and the various platforms of the American Academy of Optometry, the African chapter. So, excuse me. So you're almost welcome, and that is how everything will be. The other rules we shall keep discussing as the session proceeds. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for creating time for this great session again. Now, moving on briefly to the great speakers that we have for today's session. I'm sure some of you have never met any of these, but I'm happy to present to you a panel of great speakers. Others are they're all from different continents, I must say, but they're all here for the same purpose, and that purpose is to make sure that we all share the same goal of getting everything done as far as the profession is concerned. That's the optometry profession and the registration for the American Academy of Optometry. So the speakers that we have for today's session, let me just bring out the poster briefly, and then so that you would attach the faces, as I mentioned, their respective names. Can someone confirm that you can now see the poster with the respective speakers?
Yes, wonderful. Can
Great.
see that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So we shall have Linda Thornley, and Linda is a librarian from the Western Sydney University in Australia. Linda will be one of the first speakers immediately after the opening remarks. And then Linda has been accompanied by Lisa Worthington, who's also from the Western Sydney University in Australia. And Lisa is the academic literacy coordinator for that great university. And then after the first part of the plagiarism presentation, we shall have panel discussion, which will be led by Dr. Levi or Swago, who's also from Western Sydney University and is currently based in Australia. And Dr. Levi has also been accompanied by two great speakers or two great professionals or two great specialists in the field of optometry. And the first one is Professor Degal Chugbo from Salus University from the United States of America. And then we also have Dr. Wadwo Akufo from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. So you can see that we're blessed to have such a great panel and very eloquent speakers to take us through plagiarism as far as the preparations are concerned. So without wasting a lot of time, we shall get to the speakers later, but I would like to invite Dr. Levy, who will present on behalf of the African chapter of the American Academy of Optometry as the president, to give us the welcoming remarks. Over to you, Dr. Levi.
Yeah, thanks, Wanok, and Happy New Year, everybody. And it's been great to have everyone come back to the new year, energized to get the fellowship done. And this is part of the initiative that African chapter for the American Academy of Optometry has started since 2022. So we want to make sure that we have professionals who are informed, empowered, and enriched with knowledge to go through the fellowship and be successful. So we started a mentorship program, and part of that mentorship program is to build capacity in research and writing skills, clinical skills through this platform. And it's become very eminent that our trainings during schools are not sufficient to give us the skills that we need to write scientifically, to reference properly, to make sure we don't plagiarize. That has become a concern to the group, and recent incidents have shown that there's need for this capacity building in this space to make people more confident when they write and to write properly. So we liaise with Western Sydney University. Of course, the university is one of the priorities of Western Sydney. If you don't know, is to empower researchers from Africa. It's become a concern. It's become something that the Vice Chancellor is interested in. So this really fits into what they want to do, and strategically, we are positioned to be able to tap into the resources that university have got in this space to help Africans developing their skills for research as well. So thanks to Linda and Lisa and to Lily Collison and the team who have really made it possible for this team to be here. They are very busy people, so I do appreciate the time they're spending with us. It is post their work hour, but they've decided to stay back and make sure that they can conduct this workshop for us. So we don't take that for granted. Thank you so much. And I wouldn't say much until at the end of that. I just hope we have a good session and people will learn a lot from this. And I welcome everybody again to 2024, an exciting year, and see you guys at the end of the program here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levy, for the welcoming remarks on behalf of the African chapter of the American Academy of Optometry. Thank you so much, and I would like to now take this opportunity to welcome and hand over to our speakers, Linda and Lisa. I'll just mention in that particular order, but I think Linda knows who will go first. So I will hand over the screen and everything else to them. But thank you so much once again, Linda and Lisa, for creating time for this. Over to you. You're most welcome. The audience is all yours.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. It won't be a moment and I'll get that all up. Okay, I'm just going to move people's faces out of my way. If I'm looking to the side, I've got my chat going, so please do put anything in the chat that you think might be relevant. I am going to start today's presentation with our normal acknowledgement that we do at Western Sydney University with respect to for Aboriginal cultural protocols. Western Sydney University Library acknowledges the traditional custodians of the unceded lands and waterways on which our libraries are located and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The university works across many different lands and acknowledges the Darug Eora Darawal, also known as Tharawal and Wiradjuri peoples, and thanks them for their support of its work in their lands, gratitude and beyond. We do celebrate the knowledge and living cultures of Indigenous Australians and acknowledge their important contribution to teaching, learning and research. We acknowledge that the activities currently delivered across our campuses are a continuation of teaching and learning that has occurred on these lands for tens of thousands of years. We also pay our respects to any First Nations people in the meeting today and welcome all guests to the meeting. Thank you for indulging me with that acknowledgement. So we're going to talk today about academic integrity in research. Myself and my colleague Lisa will be presenting this, and please do put any comments, questions in the chat. We will be monitoring that and we will try to answer any of those questions and comments as we go through, but we will have some time at the end as well. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? These are the 5 general areas that we're going to touch on today. So we're going to look at why we publish, a little bit about academic integrity, referencing, how to write evidence, and also look at some plagiarism detection software. So a little bit of everything in there, but let's see how we go. So why do we publish? Lots of different reasons, but collectively as the Academy, we want to build the body of knowledge. So helping researchers to develop and expand their own research, connecting with other researchers. We do want to improve discoverability. And in doing that, it helps each and every one of us maintain awareness of any new knowledge, new developments, connect with other researchers as we do our own research, because we know that lots of different things happen at the same time around the world. So having that open publication really helps that. We want to avoid duplication of effort. So in publishing data sets and those other elements, it helps us to connect with other researchers and use each other's work to further the area of our discipline. How about individually? So individually as researchers, we love receiving recognition and credit for the work that we have put in, because let's face it, research is really hard and publication can be incredibly brutal. It's, you know, a lot of sweat and tears and effort goes into getting published, and we want to make sure that everyone gets the correct recognition for that. Peer review is also a really important part of publication. And the peer review means that all of the work that we do is assessed by our peers to make sure it's of the highest quality. Publication also helps to improve your visibility as a researcher, and in doing that attracts collaborators, which means that you can take your research forward, make it better, reach new heights, and really make a difference in the world. And that real world impact is what we all want to see. Okay, so where does academic integrity come into all of this? So I've popped the Cambridge definition in here. So the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles that you refuse to change. So you have to be really committed to those. And it means that you act with honesty, trust, fairness, respect, and responsibility, which I think we can all agree we all aspire to. In academia, integrity protects your reputation, not just of yourself as an individual, but of the institution or industry body that you represent. It can also protect you from criminal activities such as predatory publications and others that try to take advantage of you. So academic misconduct, what does this look like? Now, we all know what it sort of looks like in a coursework setting, but what does it look like for researchers? So I've got some examples on the screen here. So cheating. In an academic context, this might be falsifying experimental results. And it may not be falsifying everything. It may be only providing some of it and not all of it. So it gives a false impression of the research and the experimental results. Contract cheating. That term is, thrown around a little bit, but paying somebody else to write your thesis or any other written work for you. Now, I'm going to go so far as saying putting prompts into generative AI may be seen as contract cheating by some. It's still a very grey area at the moment, but be very careful, because I will come back to plagiarism detection software later in the presentation, but those sort of things get picked up. So be very careful with any of those AI generators. There are significant concerns around those at the moment. What about plagiarism? And that's sort of the focus for today, but these are all interconnected. So plagiarism, passing off somebody else's published work or ideas as your own. And that does include self-plagiarism or recycling your own work. Collusion and corruption is also part of academic misconduct. So this could include something like a secret agreement between two parties, which leads to an unfair advantage. And that might be something like price fixing, market allocation, or bid grant tender rigging. Citation cartels are something that we've seen in the past, whereby a group of people get together and agree to cite each other's work. And that's called a citation cartel. Extreme self-citation also comes under this. We don't expect people to cite themselves in extreme ways. So just make sure you keep a balance in those sort of areas. Okay, so what do some of these things look like in practice? So self-plagiarism or text recycling. Reusing your own work and your own words can be very tempting, but you should really avoid it. Now, this could include text, images, figures, tables, anything like that from your work. If you do have a good reason to reuse elements, reuse it as little as possible. Now, my colleague Lisa will get into the mechanics of paraphrasing a little bit later in the presentation, but some reasons to avoid self-plagiarism is to maintain the integrity. We want to see your publications building on each other, taking your research forward. We don't want to repeat the same thing over and over again. We also want to avoid copyright infringement. So when you publish, some publishers have a copyright agreement, and it's really important to have a look at that as you go forward, because you don't want to get in trouble with your previous publishers either. So what else do we want to have a look at? Salami publication. You may not have heard this term, but it happens in academia. So there's lots of different names for this, but essentially what it means is slicing up your research into teeny tiny little chunks in order to get as many publications as possible. What we do want to see is we want to see each publication you do be a meaning of research. It needs to have its own context and be meaningful in what it offers to the reader. We don't want to ask readers to read lots of your publications in order to get the context of what you're trying to publish. And salami publication can lead to that reuse of your own work over and over again, which we want to avoid. So things to think about as you're looking to publish is, well worth doing. So what are some consequences of plagiarism? So if you do plagiarize or participate in any sort of academic misconduct, it can undermine confidence in your research or in the research area. If part of a work is plagiarized, then, do we have confidence that other parts of the research work is accurate? If there's intentional plagiarism, is it a sign of generalized inattention to details within your research? It creates doubt. And if research is plagiarized and then it's published and drawn back from a journal, so it's retracted, then research effort can be wasted if it's withdrawn from a journal. And that can interrupt the dissemination of research in that way. On a personal level, it can also undermine your credibility as a professional within the research field. Not citing the work of others is seen as academic bad manners, for want of another term. So we want to know where you're getting your research from, and we want to know, what other researchers you're collaborating with and how you want to take that forward. Let me just see if I can eliminate some of this annotation that has gone on my screen and get rid of that menu board. Okay. One more I didn't get. There we go. Okay, let's go forward. All right. So moving on. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lisa, who's going to have a look at referencing for us. So Lisa, just let me know when you want me to change slides and I will keep clicking through.
Linda, hello everyone. I'm really happy to join you today. So let's go into referencing. Why do we reference? I know that this is something that we do in academia, but what is the actual reason behind doing that? So we do want to think about when I do provide a correct reference and when I'm providing in-text citations, what am I actually achieving? So I'm showing that I've got a lot of integrity there as a researcher. It kind of lets the readers know, what have I researched? What have I looked at? What have I read that informs this, this paper or this discussion that I'm forming? It also shows basically all the things that I've read. It kind of shows people, and in a way, it's a way to show off my own knowledge as well as give the appropriate reference and, kind of, I guess, credit to those who deserve it. So in this sense as well, we want to think about basically adding credibility to our own work. So as we know, when we use a particular argument, we need to have something to back that up. And the better that the evidence that we have is, and the more that we kind of show that evidence and put that forward in a correct way, using these correct in-text citations, reference lists at the end, and so on, the better our work really looks. So when we do this as well, what are we doing? We're also trying to establish basically our own academic voice in the context of our peers. So in a way, we could even be reviewing some of the literature that's already gone before in regards to some studies that we're trying to, I guess, develop or put forward. So in this sense, we are kind of then in an academic way, sharing our opinions or positions on those, and references help us to do that as well. So it kind of also helps us to establish, where is my place in the field at the moment? Where does my research sit? So that assists that as well. Sometimes having a lot of these references also assists us to find that gap in the research where we're actually positioning and doing our own research. So in this sense as well, we do want to make sure that we are basically acknowledging all those people that have contributed before. So in a sense, we do want to think about, I guess, paying respect to those who have gone before us in our academic fields, and kind of in that sense, showing both our knowledge of who has come before us, but also giving the proper credit to those who have done a lot of the work that makes the work that many of us do in our research fields possible today. May I have the next slide, please, Linda? Thank you. So as many of us know, when we're referencing, we're basically looking at a two-part process. The first part is the in-text citation. So this is basically a very brief record of where something may appear in my paper. So it shows here directly where I'm actually using that research, You know, this statement is drawn from the ideas of whoever that might be. And we will talk about in a moment what those statements might look like. Some of them might be paraphrased, they might be quoted, it could be a summary. This assists me because as a researcher as well, as all of you would know, when you go through and you're kind of reading, you might think, oh, actually my research is about this and I want to know more about this point. So in that sense, I can kind of have a look and say, oh, in this example, oh, yep, I see that's Carrick, Sen and others, 2019. Let me flick to the end. Let me flick to my research list, my reference list, sorry. And at the end, then I can have all of those details. So another reason that we do reference is so that as a researcher, I'm able to follow along with you where you got your sources. And this can assist us when we're trying to build up perhaps our libraries in terms of, you know, what has gone before us. So we see here when we see the part 1 Intex citation as part of the sentence there, the part of the sentence that does refer to this information, we've put in the author because there's more than one author. As you can see at the bottom, there's quite a few authors. And in this sense, we want to show that. So we kind of shorten it and then we add 2019, the year in close brackets. So this may seem like I've done my job, but we do need to have more information. So we see at the end how this might appear in the cited resources list. So here we've got more details. I can see all of the authors. I can see their initials. We have here basically the year. I've got the title. I've got the journal name. And then I've got some other information such as the volume and the issue number and the DOI. So we need to make sure that all of these are there. And so now we can have a look at basically some of the information we need to gather in our own work to make this a little bit easier for us. Could I have the next one, please, Linda? Thank you. So when I'm going ahead and I'm doing my own work, what are some of the things I need to keep in mind to bring in terms of the elements I need to create a full reference? Sometimes this seems a bit straightforward, but sometimes when I'm rushing, if I'm not setting myself up with, I guess, a good process, sometimes I might just write down the year and the name. But we need to write down more than that, especially when we're taking notes. Sometimes I have forgotten about it in the past and then searched a lot trying to find who Smith 2008 is, for example, and lots of people have that last name. So we want to make sure that we write down who created the resource. So we want to list the author's family name and their initials so that I have all of the information. Next, I want to have a think about when was this resource created? So I want to look for the year of creation. After that, of course, I need the title. So what is this resource called? So I'll write that down in full. Then I need to think about where do I actually find this resource? So this can be quite different depending on if this is a journal. If it is an e-resource, I'd be thinking about, okay, what's the title of this journal? What's the DOI, if that's available? Is there a URL? Is there an internet address available? Do I need to know the volume and the issue number if there is one? So in that sense, we want to make sure that we at least gather these pieces of information when we are trying to create some references. So it is good to note here that we need to think about the formatting. This does depend on the referencing style, as well as some of the conventions that we do use when we reference inside the text. So it is good, always refer back to your referencing style guide. That will tell you everything that you need to know, specifically in regards to should there be an indent and so on. I think it's always really good to kind of final check those things, especially if you're sending a publication. I know that most publishers are quite strict on that, and I myself have had things returned to me if I haven't paid proper attention to detail. Could I have the next one, please? Thank you. So with referencing styles, we've touched on this. In that sense, there's a lot of different referencing styles, and you may like to let us know which style you use the most in the chat. basically I see a lot of APA and Harvard and also Vancouver, particularly when I was working in the medical school. But there can be many others, because we know when we publish for journals, they might have their specific version of a particular main style. We know with Harvard, there's many different ones that pop up. So Harvard, WSU, Harvard, UNSW, whatever it might be. So in that sense, it's good to think about which one you're using, and that may change depending on where you're publishing as well. I can see Vancouver, I can see a bit of APA popping up as well, which is good. I think I know the most about Harvard, but APA and Harvard are my most used. So yeah, we want to make sure that basically when we're publishing that we're using the right style. So you might think, how am I meant to manage all this information if I'm collecting all of this stuff and I've got all of these pieces of information for many articles when we're publishing or doing large pieces of research? For those of you that are engaged in your PhD or have already done your PhDs, you know how much work that is. So how should I manage that? One of the ways we can do that is with referencing tools, and we do want to use ones that are reputable. I know sometimes my students will use websites like Cite This For Me, and I can always tell when I look at it because it's done in a not very good way. It's not consistent. I can't tell that it's following a particular style that I can recognize. So we do want to avoid that one. They don't really generate anything very accurate. And I find that AI also doesn't really help. It generates nothing that's actually accurate. So I would leave that one and not really go to that. So your options, things like EndNote, that's the one that I use and have used for many years. You can have free and paid options with this one. I think definitely there's an online option and also the desktop option. Linda, is that the case that the online option is the free one?
Yeah, look, EndNote Online Classic is available for free anywhere in the world. However, I will put a caveat on that. The desktop version of EndNote is far superior to the online.
Yeah.
If you don't want EndNote desktop, perhaps choose Mendeley as a better option for a free version. But industry standard EndNote, by and large, EndNote desktop is the best one out there. But they do also play nicely with each other. You can export from one and import into the other, so you can switch between them if you need to or want to. So there's different options out there, and the information on how to do that is publicly available. Also with EndNote Desktop, Mendeley Online, Zotero Online, there is the option to create custom reference styles if one doesn't exist for a particular journal that you need to publish in. So there is a lot of scope for, creativity within that space to make sure you've got the tools that you really need to publish accurately.
I definitely think EndNote's the standard, and I think because they developed first in the desktop version, perhaps why that's the better kind of version for them. Whereas Zotero, I think, was primarily like a web-based one and maybe still is only. But yeah, so you've got that version, definitely. EndNote, Mendeley is also quite popular amongst colleagues of mine, particularly working on bigger research projects and sharing libraries and so on. That seems to be a really popular option. Zotero as well. As Linda noted, we can definitely kind of play with, each of those as well. So use kind of Zotero or EndNote, together. And sometimes people will do that, or they will also use perhaps a cloud version and then change over to perhaps the paid desktop download version just before they publish as well. So do have a look at those. I do think that if you don't already, it's a good idea to think about learning how to use one, because I think that they do make life easier, because yeah, as humans, we're not really good, I think, many of us, at storing, large volumes of information. So I would recommend it. If you'd like, pop in the chat for me what you use now, if you use EndNote, Mendeley or Zotero. It'd be nice to know if any of these are popular with you, and if you have anything that you kind of prefer, if you have used them before. Okay, next one, please, Linda, if you can. Thank you. Oh, I see one. EndNote. Mendeley, EndNote. Yep. Cool. Good to see some people have experience with those. Amazing. Thanks all. So EndNote and Mendeley, however, having both in your word tabs appears disruptive to documents. Yes, sometimes it may be a bit disruptive if you've got both going on, especially if you're doing cite while you write with Word. I don't know how Word copes with that, actually.
Word doesn't cope with both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
So you need to choose which one you're going to use with the EndNote, with the Word plugins, because having both of the plugins in Word at the same time will create conflicts. So I do recommend, if you're going to use one, plug it in. You can always turn it off if you're going to use the other, and you know, switch between them that way. But you do have to turn one off when you turn one on, and vice versa, because yeah, you will get conflicts. So yeah, it's a thing.
Definitely juggling all of the pieces of the puzzle. Okay, let's have a chat about evidence. So why do we use evidence in our work? So when we collect information, this actually becomes evidence for us as we're writing. Why do we need it? We need that to support our argument. So as we know, we can't just put forward our own kind of opinion. We need to kind of say, where did you get this from? And that's all part of the academic thing that we do. So in this sense, when we think about evidence, it's definitely not everything that's available on that particular topic, because I think that would in some ways be, too difficult to achieve. So when I bring evidence, what I'm trying to do is just bring the information that's actually relevant to your specific argument at that time. So what we need to do as well, yes, I need to bring evidence, but I need to go a little bit further than that. So sometimes we have evidence, we pop it in there, and we might just leave it there. We may not kind of make any kind of commentary on it, but we need to do that. So we actually need to comment or explain the evidence after we've put that in. So regardless of if I'm popping in a quote, a bit of a summary or a paraphrase, I do want to make sure that I'm actually here creating an argument in some way through explaining that evidence. So not just relying on what someone else has said, even though they may have said it very, very well, but how are you actually using that? How does that relate to your research and so on? So I think in that way, we do want to kind of make that something that we make sure we do each time. Next one, please, Linda. Thank you. So in a sense, when am I actually writing evidence? Because sometimes we might think, yeah, is that something that happens later in the process? Ideally, what we want to be doing is we want to be thinking about making notes early on and making good notes from our source documents. And that's when we start to actually write about evidence. So it is good to think about recording things accurately when we make notes, as I mentioned, kind of popping down those bibliographic pieces of information that we need. If we don't do that, sometimes later on we think, wow, I really need to use this information and I don't know where it's come from. So we do want to make sure that we make our lives easier in the first instance for sure. So in this sense as well, we want to think about, yeah, my notes are not really polished. Perhaps it's not a final draft. Perhaps I'm creating a first draft, but we do want to have effective notes that we can use. So meaning that my notes then should be made up of things like summaries, paraphrases, and so on. So also having quotes when needed. And we want to think about also your comments about them. So one tip I have for note taking, if you want to do that in a more effective way, is definitely kind of, yes, you might write down some quotes that you think are really pertinent to your work, some paraphrases. Also include your ideas about them, because sometimes you forget them at that time. And this will really help you during the write-up as well. So when we're writing evidence as well, of course, we know this has three main forms, as I've said before. So we've got quotes, summaries, and paraphrases. I think at this stage, it is really important to note that good academic writing usually doesn't rely heavily on a lot of quotes. When do we know that we should, or, that we want to use a quote? In that sense, my recommendation is obviously only choosing the quote that you need, the part of the text that you need, but also thinking about, could I say this in my own words? Do I really need it in its original form? Why do I feel that I need it in its original form? So in that sense, I would, you know, even if you've kind of written down heaps of things in your notes and you have a lot of quotes, be a little bit more selective about that sometimes, just because it can be, you know, in some ways something that we do because, yes, we really love how it sounds, but then we kind of miss out on adding those things back into our own voice as we're trying to develop our own argument. Next one, please. So you might ask yourself when you're writing evidence, what kind of evidence do I actually need here? So firstly, you can ask yourself, do I need details here? So if I don't need a lot of details and if I just want an overview and I've said, no, I don't need a lot of details, I want the main idea. I can just go ahead and summarize. However, if I've answered, yes, I do need these original words, then I'll go ahead and basically think about which kind do I need. So if I've said, yes, I want to comment on the words used, quote, and then comment about the quote that you've used, give your own commentary, so to speak. Or if I've said, no, I don't need the original words, then I can go for a paraphrase. And I'll talk about what each of these is very briefly now as well. Next one, please. Thank you. So quotes. When we look at a quote, we always need to use the same words as the original source. We do want to be accurate, so we don't want to represent someone else's work as saying, you know, something, or even having different public, you know, punctuation in it or something going on. We want it to be accurate. So we do want to use the quote in the context of your writing and your argument. Sometimes quotes can be used out of context. They kind of sound like they fit in, but if you go back to the original and you go, no, that was not the point of this whole thing. So we do want to make sure that we are doing that in an accurate way. We want basically using quotes that are only going to be something that we comment on. So we need to have in our mind how this quote is actually relevant to the work that we're doing, relevant to the current argument that we're making, and make some kind of commentary on that. So I often joke with my undergraduate students when they're not kind of doing what they should be doing, please don't drop your quotes and run. Tell me about them. I want to know more. So we can keep those in mind as well. We want to have, I guess, a smooth flow between your own writing and what's going on in terms of a quote. So we do want to maintain a sense of flow and grammar in our sentence with the quote so that it isn't too abrupt and we are keeping readers following along and moving with us. I think that's the best way. So we do also need to follow some rules when we quote, depending on what we're using. So in that sense, we do need to follow the guidelines in that way. So each citation style will have its own way of including, let's say, an in-text reference. Do note that you will need to include a page number when you are quoting as opposed to a paraphrase. So we need to have that, but sometimes it can also be, depending on the length of the quote, that you may need to indent it separate to the main text. So that can really change from citation style to citation style as well. So it's something good to think about, I think, and to be aware of in that way. May I have the next slide, please?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have summaries. So as we know, summaries use different words and text than actually we have in the source text. So they only really will encompass the main idea that's being covered, and they're much shorter than the original text. So this is how we can kind of differentiate the summary and the paraphrase. So in this way as well, what we want to think about is you know, in a sense, presenting a range of ideas, perhaps showing synthesis or discussion as well. So in that sense, I could use some summaries to kind of show, yes, this work and this work and this work all have perhaps some similar ideas. And we can do that through summary. So that way, instead of including heaps of details that are not really relevant to my readers, I can actually just provide a short summary and give them just the information that they need. Next one, please. Thank you. So paraphrases, often these ones are the most tricky in some ways to write, to execute in a good way. So what we want to do is we're looking at a text that usually is quite a similar length to the original. So that in itself can lend itself to being quite similar to the original text, but what do we do to actually change those? So what we want to ensure is that we are using different words than the original text, but not just different words. We also want to ensure that we're having different sentence construction or different order of information from the original source text. So we don't want to kind of just rewrite the ideas almost as if it's, pretty similar to a quote. We want it to be different than that. But we do want to make sure that we are communicating the same main idea and the relevant details. Usually we can include some kind of commentary as well about the ideas that are being analysed or synthesized here as well. Basically, when I use a paraphrase, what I'm trying to do is I'm using that so that I can perhaps discuss what the meaning is here, how this relates to my own research. And this can help to clarify perhaps what I'm doing, why I'm making the choices that I am within my research in this way. So kind of used in different ways so that I can discuss the ideas of others as well. So that's also something to think about, how we do discuss the ideas of others and what the conventions are in your discipline as well for doing so. Could I have the next one, please? So just some additional support as well. I didn't want to go through everything today with you because I'm sure many of you have this already sorted. But we do have some information on our website that you can go and seek out yourself. So here we have some information on how to quote properly, a document on summarizing, and also a document on paraphrasing as well. And if you are interested in thinking a little bit more about what are some of the best ways to introduce the work of others and to talk about your perhaps own positions and provide some commentary on that, I particularly like some of the phrase banks that are included on the Manchester Phrase Bank as well. That one can be really useful if you're feeling a bit stuck. I know basically that those things continue to be an issue. Sometimes when I'm writing for a really long time, I will continually use the same kind of words to talk about something. So it can kind of be helpful when you're feeling a bit stuck in terms of having some new ways of reporting that information as well. Excellent. I don't know if that's it from my side, Linda.
Just about.
Yeah.
I did want to just mention that one comment I get back from a lot of the researchers I work with is that they find it really hard to say something better than the original author. And one strategy that I have used with a number of people now is to use the dictate function in Word. So when you're looking at an original source, you can't see anything else. So what I recommend to people is read a paragraph to a whole section, whatever you think is good, cover it up with something so that you cannot visually see it. Turn on the dictate function and actually talk into Word and get it to write your words down as you explain in your own words what that means and how it relates to your research. So sometimes verbalizing it in that way and having it recorded for you will actually help you put it into your own words and have your own voice come out in your writing. So that's just a tip that some of my research students have found really, really useful to use. So use that if you will. That's some free tips for today.
I might just comment on something that Levi's popped in the chat, if that's okay, Linda. Just a question in terms of what are the consequences of plagiarism if caught? Will you cover that going forward in your presentation, Linda? I think so, but should we comment on that separately?
We're going to have a look at plagiarism detection software and what to do with that in a minute. But look, there's lots of different consequences, and we did go through a few of those earlier in terms of, muddying the literature. Papers can get retracted. You might affect your reputation. If you're a student at a university, you can get expelled. You can have your whole degree taken off you. There can be some really severe consequences to it. But really the point is keeping your academic integrity intact, writing with every shred of integrity that you have builds up your reputation. And we want all of our researchers to be the best that they can be. That's our whole aim. So any of the advice we're giving you on best practice is aimed at making you the best researcher out there, and it's to build your skills and build your reputation. Would you classify publishing your school research work as plagiarism? Well, depends what you mean by school research. So if you've done research work as part of your university studies, that is your original research work, as long as it is conducted with integrity. So yeah, master's work. So I do see a lot of my Masters of Research students write a thesis for their masters, and that is actually not published anywhere. So what they do is they take that master's thesis and then they recraft it into potentially some journal articles or conference papers. But keep in mind, when you are submitting to a journal or a conference, you need to customize that article to that particular publishing outlet. Okay, so if a thesis has been published, so we're talking, say, Master's Philosophy, PhD often, I do not recommend republishing it, because a thesis in itself is a published work. And when you're looking at conferences and you're looking at journal publications, they have their own style and their own audience. And remember, we want to take the research forward. So what is your audience expecting to get? You can take a thesis, has a different writing style to a journal publication. So you don't want to just grab a chunk, copy and paste it and send it off, because that's likely going to end with a rejection because it doesn't match the journal's aims and scope. So you do a lot of rewriting in this area. So crafting your piece of writing to the journal that you want to publish in, that speaks to its audience, that shows how your research relates to that audience, is really important. And your whole thesis just as a chunk isn't suitable for that. You might take parts of it. You might reference the thesis if you're reusing a figure or table or a set of data. You can do that. But personally, I don't recommend just taking a chunk of a published thesis and trying to publish as a journal article. To put it bluntly, I think that's a really lazy way of doing things. Would you agree, Lisa?
I think so, definitely. And I mean, I know that we have this thing now that we all have a lot of pressure if we're doing research to publish a lot. And so, there's a lot of different ways to try and do that. But I definitely wouldn't recommend, just trying to publish your whole thesis as a journal article or 2 halves or whatever you think the word limit is or something like that. I would probably steer away from that. From my own master's research, I did publish, I think, maybe 1 or 2 articles, but, kind of very segmented parts of the research that could stay, kind of stand by themselves. And I think when doing that as well, I only really did so because my supervisor kind of said, yeah, look, this would be a good idea. The examiners indicated so as well, during their comments and so on. So yeah, in that sense, I would say do kind of consider that, because I know we have this kind of publish or perish mentality, but we also want to maintain the quality of our work and the integrity of what we're doing as well. And I know particularly in my own field, there are people known in my own field for like, oh yeah, he's publishing the same thing again. It's the same thing rehashed. And personally, I don't want to have that reputation myself. So yeah, that would be my advice, is to steer clear of that, not to never publish, but to just do it in a selective way.
Yeah, strategic, I think, is best.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay, so let's keep going on and let's have a look at some plagiarism detection software. So there's lots of different plagiarism detection software, and they're called that, but they're actually not plagiarism detection softwares. They're text matching software. It cannot tell you whether something is plagiarized or not. It text matches your work to some sort of database or repository that the host uses. Now, it's the interpretation of the matches that actually makes the difference. I prefer to see these type of software tools as tools that can help you improve your academic writing, because the feedback that you get back can give you clues on how to get better at paraphrasing, referencing, and all those sort of things. And quite honestly, not every plagiarism detection tool or text matching tool is equal. Some of them incorporate AI detection, some of them flag potential hidden text. There's all sorts of variants on this. Now, at Western Sydney University, we have access to Turnitin. Now, the reason I'm going to take you through Turnitin is because Turnitin and Authenticate, both products are owned by iParadigms. Authenticate is used by many, many publishers, and Turnitin and Authenticate is basically the world standard. It's got the biggest database. It's been around for the longest. So it has a lot of good reputation in the academic sector. Having said that, not everyone's got access to it, and I completely understand that. So Turnitin itself looks at any papers submitted to any coursework link, scholarly literature, so they've got agreements with lots of publishers, public websites, internet archives, and they even draw papers from what we call paper mills. So these are websites who offer papers for money. So that comes under the collusion banner. So it draws from that. Turnitin also does detect many of the AI tools, including Grammarly and Quillbot, which a lot of people are using nowadays. So be very careful with those tools. I know it's very tempting, particularly if you're writing in English and it's a second language. What things like Grammarly do is they make it a very generic voice. It's not your personal voice coming through, which I think is a shame, because your voice and your enthusiasm for your research is absolutely what we want to hear. So just be a little bit careful with those particular tools. So when you use any of these tools, and I mean, I'm using Turnitin as an example, review the report that comes back. It will highlight text from your paper, and it will provide links to original sources in most cases. So I'm just going to flash up on screen an example of a Turnitin report. This is a sample paper that we've got, and it shows the type of thing that comes back, just so that you can see what this looks like. So as I go through this paper, you can see that I've got colored highlights on the text, and here are all my text matches. So what I would normally recommend people do is just scroll through the paper. So if I've got something tiny like this, I'm probably not going to worry about it too much. A lot of this is common phrasing that is this small, so I'm not going to worry too much. And I'm going to keep looking down and go, well, what else can I see? Okay, so I've got two in close proximity here. We tend to say in a lot of these reports that come back that rainbows are bad, because we don't want to see people kind of squishing together different sources to try and make a paragraph. That's not really good integration of research. We want to have a look at blocks of information here. So we can see that there's a citation here, but maybe it should have been a quote rather than a poor attempt at paraphrasing, or it needs to be paraphrased better. So it gives you an indication of what you need to do. So we keep going with looking through it. So we've got a pretty significant chunk here, and I can see that there's quotation marks, and there's been an attempt at a citation here, but it's missing elements. There's no date there. So again, it's an opportunity to go, oh, I've put an author in there that I've referenced, but I haven't done it right. Let me just fix that. So it gives you an opportunity to make it better. And we keep going through and we keep going through. So little bits I'm not too worried about. But oh my goodness, there's a huge chunk. I've copied and pasted a whole paragraph in, and maybe I meant to go back and paraphrase it, but I haven't done it. I haven't quoted it either. So that gives me the opportunity now to go, okay, I need to go back to my original document. I need to decide whether I want to paraphrase it or I want to put it as a quote. I would suggest probably a paraphrase would be your best option, but it depends on the context. And we go through and we go through. Now, different tools have different settings. Even different links within the same tool have different settings. For me, I always make sure I include the reference list and any quotes in any matching, because I don't want people to get comfortable with trying to, game it to a certain percentage, because the reality is there is no safe percentage, because none of these tools encompasses everything. And keep in mind that when you get to peer review stage, if you have used a resource that is not available electronically, it's only available in print, and one of your reviewers recognizes a chunk of text from that print resource that hasn't been digitized, and they go, hang on a minute, I've got that on my shelf, let me just look that up. You're going to get caught. So don't rely on things not being electronic as a safety net. It doesn't work. I've seen people caught out by this before. So use these tools to improve your academic writing. Make sure that you work with integrity at all times. Make sure you quote, paraphrase, summarize, and cite everything. So as you're going through your matched report, ask yourself, have I written an original piece of work? Is it all my own thoughts and ideas backed up by evidence? Have I acknowledged all of the sources that I've used? Do I need to add a citation? Did I forget any quotation marks or other referencing conventions? Are all of them in my reference list? Another thing to consider, am I relying too much on one or two sources? Have I got a balanced viewpoint in my piece of writing? And has any section of this work already been published by me? Is the overlap too much, or is this building on my previous research? And again, remember, there is no safe percentage. It's the interpretation of the report you get back that counts. Now, not everyone has access to Turnitin. I recognize it. There are a number of free plagiarism detection tools available, but before you use any of them for your writing, it is important to check a few things. Check where they store whatever you upload. And this is the same caveat for AI, any AI tools you use. Check what they use anything you upload for. Check what your work is going to be compared against. So websites, databases, anything like that. Check the size of the submission you can put in and the number of submissions you can check for free, or whether there is a cost to upgrade that you are willing to pay. Here are a few free plagiarism detection tools that you can use. I've had a quick look at each of those. All of them have free and paid options. Most of them only check against publicly available online content. Grammarly also checks against the ProQuest database, but that is just one database. It's not everything. So these are not going to give you the extensive quality that Turnitin will do, but it will give you some feedback if you don't have access to anything else. So it's better than nothing, and it can help to improve your academic writing. So use that as you will. Okay, so we have come to the point of Q&A. So I want to open up the floor to any questions that you might have. So I might stop screen sharing so that I can see everyone's faces, and please ask any questions of Lisa and myself. We're happy to answer any questions or reply to any comments that you may have. I know we've done a little bit through the chat, but Please. The floor is yours. Please ask.
Thank you so much, Linda and Lisa, for such a comprehensive presentation, I must say, about plagiarism. And you didn't only look at plagiarism, but you went an extra mile and looked at the other small bits and pieces which make up plagiarism, which is actually a great one. So thank you so much for this. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, use the reactions. But I think before we even go into the questions, because once we go into the questions, some people may not want to be really recorded. So we're about to reach that point. But yeah, before we go into that, I would like to recognize the presence of very important people that we have in this particular chat. And one of them is Obi Malope, the one who's in charge of Africa Media and is in charge of the publications and making sure that most of the things are available for the African chapter of the American Academy of Optometry. So thank you so much, Obi Malope, for creating time for this. And then we have Professor Tuwani on board. Thank you so much. And then Associate Professor Bernardine. Thank you so much for creating time for this particular session. But thank you, everyone. Yeah, we're going to move into the question and answer session now. We shall spend like about 10 minutes for the first part of questions and answers in relation to Linda and Lisa's presentation. Then later on, we shall hear from our other panelists. We'll be given just a few minutes and then we shall have more questions in relation to that. So thank you so much. Feel free to use the reactions and everything as we proceed. But thank you so much for the comprehensive presentation.